Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. I wanted to cover a couple of topics today. First up, wanted to cover a viewer response to previous podcast about becoming specialized. A viewer commented that from my experience, unless you are on one of the teams that provide specialized services, from my experience, it is very difficult to get projects on such specialized teams. I've networked with several people on specialized teams, and they, for the most part, see general audit people as generalists. They will give you insight into what they do, but the chances of getting picked up on a project and being able to work with them to develop specialized skills is hard to impossible. The other thing is it seems that leadership of teams that do generalized work, for example, audit, steer people away from doing specialized work, and the firms try to prevent people from cross-pollinating. And I would agree with this viewer's view because it is very hard to become specialized, but that's why I did that podcast, because this is what really is going to set you apart, and it's really going to make your career a lot easier if you choose to leave the Big Four accounting firms. It's also going to open a lot of doors because the Big Four, the central practice of audit or tax is just being a generalist and doing tons of admin, and then knowing basics enough to know when to get specialists involved, knowing when how to manage a client engagement. And so you can go a very long time in your career without becoming specialized at all. The years go by quick. You just worry about the next day, the next performance feedback season, and you never really grow as a person. And when you try and become partner or leave the firm, your resume doesn't look as good. And whenever you do try and leave or become partner, the companies you're looking for, or the partners that are looking to promote you, there's no way to set you apart because you have the same resume as everybody else, and somebody's always looking for a specialist. Sometimes it's as easy as specializing, like hyper specializing in one industry, because if you get really focused in one industry, then you can work on the largest company in that industry, either on the engagement, or you can put your resume in front of the largest companies in that industry. But it's good if you can specialize in other really technical areas, whether it's in audit or tax. It's really, I think it's worth it. It is hard to do that. So that's why I brought it up on the podcast, because I want people to keep their eyes open to it and look for the opportunities. But also, you don't want to just touch a million different areas and never focus, because even if you're just a generalist, at least you can be really good at being a generalist. Where if you're a generalist 1 year and you specialize in one area for a busy season, like 6 months, and then transition into another team for 6 months, you risk the chance of not being good in any area and having not any group in the Big Four accounting firms want to promote you. So I would say you need to do things over a few busy seasons, whatever group you're in. For example, if you start out in a generalist group, which you will most likely do, then you need to hit a couple of busy seasons with that. Make sure you mesh with your team, learn interpersonal skills. But I would also encourage you to go to another team and specialize that and work on that for a couple of busy seasons. But some of these groups, you might not even need to spend a bunch of time with them to get specialization necessary to set yourself apart, because all you have to do is observe a little bit, find the technical skills that are valued in the marketplace or in your company or in the Big Four firm that you're in, and then try to specialize in that one area and round yourself out in that one area, and then you can leverage that later on in your career. But I just wanted to bring that comment up and talk a little bit more about specialization. I think it is important. I think people need to think about it. You have to be conscious about it, because otherwise your career is going to, be many years on the way, and you're just going to be a generalist and you're going to be in the bucket of other generalist people, other generalist candidates in the job market. So that's just something I was thinking about. This episode is brought to you by Boomer. Boomer helps you ace the interview at the Big Four accounting firms, and it does this by helping you practice on questions typically asked on the Big Four interview. And if you use the link or promo code which goes to tryboomer.com/big4, or the promo code BIG4, then listeners get 10% off their purchase. So go ahead and check out their website, tryboomer.com, and see if you like all the tools they have that can help you prep for your Big Four interview, and you do choose to purchase it. Make sure to use the link in the show notes, because with that link, you're going to get 10% off, or make sure to use our promo code. All the details are in the show notes. The next story I wanted to talk about was a story that I saw on an Australian website called Crikey. I guess that's how you know it's Australian. It's called Crikey. And they were talking about PwC and the botched rollout of the vaccine distribution in certain areas of Australia, and how PwC made $11 million off the Australian government, and they botched the rollout of the vaccine. And then partners in Australia got an 18% pay bump. And the article also talked about how Australian partners start out at $350,000 per year as their salary. And then it went on to list a whole bunch of things that PwC had done in the past year that were not good, such as slashing pay for 65% of the staff, and they slashed their pay by 4%. And then they also went to talk about the harassment claims that were levied against the Big Four over the past year. So this article really compiled some of the worst news about PwC over the past year. And we've covered a lot of these news stories on here. And then they use that to say, this is also the firm that the government chooses to help with vaccines, and consultants make a lot of money off of the government during this pandemic time. And they've done it secretly because apparently this contract with PwC was left off of the government website. And we see a lot of these articles because people aren't really familiar with the Big Four accounting firms. It's just your everyday person. And they don't realize that the Big Four accounting firms get a lot of government work, and they don't realize why. They don't realize that these are some of the largest organizations in the world, and that, yes, they're going to do a lot of things wrong, but it doesn't mean they're not going to win more government contracts. That's what the Big Four accounting firms are taking advantage of. And I think in Australia and around the world, the reason they are doing so well is because of these government contracts. Because I think that's why PwC and the other Big Four accounting firms laid people off and cut their pay last year, was because they thought the economy was going to go into a downturn, and they didn't factor in all the government work that they were going to win. And so I think it's okay that it's good that the website's bringing up all the issues that the Big Four accounting firms have, all the ethical issues, but I don't think that that's going to change anything. I think the government in Australia is probably too closely tied with the Big Four accounting firms in multiple ways. They have multiple contracts with them, and they also don't realize the nature of the Big Four accounting firms is to have a lot of professionals at the ready, and that's going to result in them winning a lot of contracts because there's not many other companies the size of the Big Four accounting firms ready to go around the world for these government contracts that are getting put out to bid. But also, another thing to consider is the Big Four accounting firms are going to bid on this work whether they have the specialization or not. And these issues don't only reside with vaccine rollouts. The Big Four accounting firms bid on work that they're not capable of handling all the time. And I think that's where the issue here relies on. They're just going to guess how much money it's going to take, and a lot of times they underbid so that they can win the work, and then they have no idea what the actual work entails. And that's not just in consulting either. That's an audit and tax. The Big Four accounting firms cut corners. And when the Big Four accounting firms tend to go over budget, that's when they stop doing the work. And then they start going back to the client. In this case, it's going to be the government. And they say, hey, pay us more. We're doing all this out of scope stuff. And then so if the government doesn't pay them or doesn't revised a contract or it's a strict contract, then the big four accounting firms cut way more corners then. And that's where I think a lot of this ethical issues result. But this isn't the first time this happens. We see this all the time. The big four accounting firms are just getting into more markets where they don't have any knowledge and they're just taking a stab in the dark. And I think that's just the nature of consulting and consulting work. So I think it's a good article by Crikey, but I don't think they're going to have the impact that they think they have. This isn't a mom and pop business that's barely getting in the government contracting game. These are the largest companies in the world, and they have strong government practices around the world. So, but I think it's just more of the nature of the business, and we'll talk about this more in future episodes. But that's the update for today. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast to get future updates, and check out the show notes for ways that you can support us. Thanks for listening.